In every one of us, there are rooms we never enter, feelings we fold away, memories we leave in shadow. Carl Jung believed that the deepest truths of our lives do not shout. They wait, in silence, in dreams, in the quiet spaces we avoid. Camera slowly tightens closer to the flame. So tonight, gently, we ask, what lives in the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at? The sensitive child of Switzerland. Switzerland in the late 19th century was a land of mountains and quiet waters, a place where the world seemed to breathe slowly. And in a small village beside a deep blue lake, a boy named Carl Gustav Jung took his first steps into a life that would one day change how we understand the human soul. From the beginning, Jung was not like other children. He was quiet, observant, and always listening, not just with his ears, but with something deeper. Where other children chased and shouted under the sun, Jung drifted, thoughtful, watching light ripple on water as though the world were trying to speak to him in reflections. He grew up surrounded by forests that seemed endless to a child. Tall trees, dark shadows, birds calling from unseen branches. When he walked along the lakeshore, he noticed how the water mirrored the sky, how what lived above also lived below. Even then, without words, the seed of understanding had already been planted. The world outside and the world inside may be reflections of one another. His father was a pastor, gentle, sincere, but burdened by doubt. He spoke of God, heaven, morality, yet in his eyes lived uncertainty. Carl could sense it. Though the words were confident, the spirit behind them trembled. And Jung learned something silently. Words are not always true. Feelings are. His mother, meanwhile, was both warm and distant, sometimes smiling with radiant tenderness, sometimes disappearing into a quiet and unreachable sadness. To Carl, she seemed to be two different people, and he felt both of them. This duality, this shifting inner presence, would stay with him all his life. He would later say, "The greatest mysteries are not outside us, they are within us." And perhaps the first mystery he tried to solve was her. But childhood was not easy. Jung was lonely, profoundly so. In school, he sat alone, watching, listening, absorbing. He felt the mood of a room before a single word was spoken. He could sense when someone was angry, or afraid, or hiding something. This sensitivity made the world feel loud, even when it was silent. When children teased him for being quiet, he did not fight. He withdrew even further, into dreams, into imagination, into a private universe where symbols and images spoke more honestly than people did. And so solitariness did not wound him. It shaped him. Voice softens like speaking beside a fire. Some souls learn to stand alone before they learn to stand tall. There was one moment that would mark him deeply. One afternoon at school, Jung was knocked to the ground by another student. Laughter rose around him. The humiliation stung, but something within him hardened. Not in anger, but in resolve. He withdrew, stopped speaking, stopped engaging. He allowed his mind to slow, to drift into dreamlike stillness. Teachers thought he was ill. Some feared he had lost his will entirely. But Jung later explained that in this silence, something awakened. He noticed the world within himself. Not imagination, but a landscape as vivid and real as the forests outside. A flicker of consciousness. A doorway opening. What others called isolation, Jung came to understand as listening. Listening to the soul. His first companions were not people, but books. He devoured them endlessly. Ancient myths, folklore, religious texts, tales of gods and monsters. Not for entertainment, but for meaning. He felt that human stories were not merely stories. They were maps. Maps of the human spirit. Maps of what we are and what we fear. At night, while others slept, Jung lay awake staring into the dark, sensing the presence of something vast and unseen. The world had a surface, but it also had a depth. His loneliness continued into adolescence, and yet, instead of hardening him, it softened him. His heart remained open. He felt the weight of cruelty, the tremor of joy, the sorrow of unspoken pain, not just in himself, but in others. He would later write, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But this realization did not come from study. It came from being alone long enough to face himself. He noticed that most people did not look inward. They were afraid of what they would find. Jung was afraid too, but he looked anyway. This was the beginning of his life's work, not in laboratories, not in libraries, but in the quiet rooms of his own mind. As he walked along the lakes of his childhood, the water taught him a lesson he never forgot. When we look on at the surface, we see only light, but the depths remain hidden, dark, silent, filled with mystery. And so it is with a human being. We present a surface to the world, a smile, a voice, a role, a mask. But beneath, there are fears, desires, memories, shadows, tendernesses, and wounds that shape our every gesture. Jung learned to look below the surface, not to judge, not to fear, but to understand. This early solitude was not a tragedy. It was preparation. The forest taught him to notice what does not speak. The lakes taught him that the unseen is as real as the seen. His parents taught him that the human soul is divided, layered, shifting. His loneliness taught him to listen inwardly. And all of this, the silence, the sadness, the observation, formed the foundation of the work that would define his life, to help others face the hidden parts of themselves. Because Jung believed something profoundly compassionate. We suffer not because darkness exists within us, but because we refuse to turn toward it. And so, the boy who walked alone by the lakes of Switzerland learned the first secret of the soul, that to understand life, one must first learn to sit with oneself in the quiet. The break from Freud. Before Carl Jung became known as the explorer of the psyche's deepest oceans, he walked alongside another giant of the mind, Sigmund Freud. Their meeting was like the meeting of two stars, bright, magnetic, inevitable. Jung admired Freud deeply. Freud was bold, brilliant, unafraid. He had carved a path into the unseen, into dreams, desire, and the unconscious long before anyone else dared to speak those words aloud. And when Jung first read Freud's work, something stirred inside him, recognition. A feeling of, yes, someone else sees it too. A meeting of two minds. When they finally met in Vienna, they spoke for 13 hours straight, without pause, without preparation, as though they had known one another long before they ever shared a room. Freud saw in Jung the future, a successor, someone young enough to carry the torch of psychoanalysis forward. Jung saw in Freud a teacher, a guide, someone who had already walked into the darkness and returned with fire. For years, they worked together, colleagues, companions, almost like father and son. They laughed together. They argued passionately. They dreamed of reshaping how humanity understood itself. And for a time, the world of the unconscious felt like a shared country in which both of them lived. But no two inner worlds are the same. Though they stood side by side, they were not the same. Freud believed the human mind was driven by desire, by instinct, by hunger, by the struggles between repression and longing. He believed that if we understood desire, we understood the human being. For Freud, the psyche was a battlefield of impulse and restraint. Jung listened. He respected. But deep inside, he felt something more. For Jung, the psyche was not just instinct. It was mystery. It was memory older than one lifetime. It was the realm of symbols, dreams, stories, gods, archetypes. Where Freud saw biology, Jung saw myth. Where Freud saw desire, Jung saw meaning. Where Freud saw wounds, Jung saw messages. The gentle beginning of the divide. At first, they tried to understand one another. They tried to explain, to bridge, to unify their ideas. But slowly, the space between them widened. Freud feared Jung's direction. He worried Jung was stepping into mysticism, into the spiritual, into the unmeasurable. Freud wanted psychology to be grounded, scientific, provable. He told Jung, we must protect the science. If the soul becomes myth, we lose our foundation. Jung answered softly, but the soul is myth. It speaks through stories, symbols, dreams. To ignore that is to misunderstand its language. This was not a disagreement of ego. It was a disagreement of worldview. They were both right, just in different ways. The pain of separation. Breaks between minds are rarely loud. They happen slowly, quietly, with sighs rather than thunder. Their letters grew strained. Their conversations more cautious. their silences heavier. It was not anger that separated them. It was truth. Jung was traveling inward, deeper into the psyche, and Freud could not follow him there. Freud needed certainty. Jung needed wonder. Freud wanted to map the unconscious like a scientist. Jung wanted to journey through it like a poet. And so they reached a point where the path between them simply ended. With sadness, they let go. After the break, the world misunderstood. People around them whispered of betrayal, conflict, ideological war. But the truth was quieter. Freud had given Jung courage. Jung had given Freud hope. Their separation was not a failure. It was evolution. No mind can remain in the shadow of another forever. Sometimes to grow, one must step away from the very light that once guided them. Jung's turning inward. After the break, Jung did not feel triumphant. He felt lost. He entered a deep inner winter, a silence inside himself. He began to dream vividly, visions of floods, cities drowning, suns collapsing into darkness. He feared he was losing his mind. But instead, something was awakening. Archetypes, symbols, ancient patterns of the human soul. He realized we are not only personal beings. We are part of something much older, something shared, something collective. This would become his greatest contribution, a collective unconscious. The idea that beneath our individual stories lies a deeper shared story, a vast ocean connecting every human heart. Some relationships are not meant to last forever. Some relationships are meant to open doors that we must walk through alone. Freud opened the door of the unconscious. But Jung walked further in. He went where language breaks, where images become truth, where dreams speak in the voice of eternity. The tender meaning of the break. To choose one's own path is never gentle. It requires sorrow. It requires standing alone. It requires listening to the voice inside that whispers, "There is something more." And Jung listened. Not because he was fearless, but because he was called. The break from Freud was not a rebellion. It was a transformation, a turning, deepening, a necessary solitude. And so Jung stepped away from the companion who once walked beside him, not into certainty, but into darkness, trusting the faint glow of a lantern he carried within. The descent into the unconscious. After the break with Freud, Jung entered a period of profound inner silence. From the outside, it looked like withdrawal, even collapse. Colleagues whispered. Friends worried. Some believed he was losing his mind. But what was happening inside him was not madness. It was a journey, a descent, a voluntary crossing of a threshold that most of us spend our lives avoiding. The dreams that called him. It began with dreams. Vast, overwhelming dreams. Dreams of floods swallowing cities. Dreams of the dead walking again. Dreams of a giant tree growing from his chest, its roots in the depths of the earth. The imagery was so immense it frightened him. These were not the small flickers of a restless mind. They were messages. He felt the unconscious was trying to speak. Not in words, but in symbols. And so Jung began to write, to draw, to record every dream, every image, every whisper from within. He did not run from the visions. He sat with them. He listened, because Jung believed something radical and compassionate. The psyche is not our enemy. It is our oldest teacher, the Red Book. This journey took shape in a great red leather-bound volume, what the world would later call the Red Book. Inside it, Jung wrote not theories, not formulas, not clinical observations, but stories of his encounters with the figures who lived within his unconscious. The book is full of color, vivid reds, golds, deep blues, painted symbols, mythic landscapes, dream dialogues. It is not a textbook. It is a map of the soul, a map drawn as he traveled through it. For years, he worked on it in secret. No one knew. He feared the world would not understand, that they would call him mad. But Jung was not lost. He was exploring. He was stepping into the place most of us avoid, the dark beneath the conscious mind, the place where unspoken feelings live, the place where we hide from ourselves. Meeting the archetypes. In the depths of this inward journey, Jung encountered archetypes, not characters of fiction, but fundamental patterns of the human experience. He met the sage, an ancient figure of wisdom, quiet and calm, who spoke in riddles and hints. This was not advice from outside. It was guidance from the oldest part of himself. He met the child, playful, innocent, unburdened. A reminder that beneath all layers of identity, the heart remains soft and original. And he met the shadow. Not a demon, not a monster, but the part of himself he had tried not to see. His fears, his anger, his envy, his unspoken impulses. The things he wished were not in him, but were. And yet, when he truly looked at the shadow, what he found was not evil, but pain, woundedness, loneliness, a plea for recognition. Jung realized the shadow is not the dark that destroys us. It is the dark we refuse to embrace, a journey most will not take. Most people avoid the unconscious. We distract ourselves. We cling to routines. We fear the night inside us. We are taught to present a face, a persona to the world. We are told to be strong, composed, unshaken. But Jung saw what happens when we hide from ourselves. What is ignored does not disappear. It returns, in anxiety, in anger, in despair, in emptiness. Healing, he believed, begins not by changing who we are, but by turning toward what we have tried not to feel. Pain has a voice. Fear has a story. Loneliness has a shape. And if we look gently, patiently, kindly, those shadows soften. They begin to speak. They begin to heal. To heal, one must first be willing to see, not to judge, not to condemn, just to acknowledge. To sit beside one's own suffering as one would sit beside a friend. Jung's descent was not heroic in the usual sense. There were no victories, no flags, no triumphs. It was made of stillness, of listening, of staying present in front of feelings that had no words. And yet, from this quiet courage, an understanding emerged. We are not one person. We are many. We are layers. We are histories. We are stories told and stories forgotten. We are both the face we show the world and the depths we keep hidden. Returning with a lantern. After years of this inward journey, Jung did not emerge untouched, but he emerged illuminated. He understood that every person carries worlds inside, worlds of memory, wound, desire, story, spirit. And he understood that the goal of life is not to rid ourselves of darkness, but to integrate it, to bring the light of consciousness into the deep places of the heart, to become whole. And so Jung descended, not to disappear, but to return with a lantern, the lantern he would later offer to all of us, a way to face ourselves without fear, a way to listen to the quiet truth beneath our thoughts, a way to become real. The shadow, the self we deny. There are pieces of ourselves we do not want to see. The moments of jealousy we pretend we're too good to feel. The anger we swallow because we have been taught that anger is shameful. The sadness we hide behind jokes, behind smiles, behind our practiced ease. We call these hidden pieces the shadow, not because they are dark, but because they live where the light has not yet reached. The shadow explained. Carl Jung saw what many had not. The shadow is not the worst in us, but the unmet needs, the unspoken fears, the unacknowledged wounds that live behind the thoughts we allow ourselves to say aloud. Fear we never admit. Grief we never name. Dreams we abandoned before we even tried. These become shadows, not because we chose to hide them, but because life taught us to. We were told to be good, to be strong, to be reasonable, to be calm, to be untroubled. And in becoming those things, we bury parts of ourselves. Voice soft, compassionate. The shadow is not evil. It is wounded. It is the child who learned not to cry because no one came to comfort them. It is the teenager who laughed along with the group because being alone was too frightening. It is the adult who says, "I'm fine," when they are quietly breaking. The shadow is not a monster. It is a memory of pain, and it waits, not to harm us, but to be seen. How the shadow speaks. Jung believed that the shadow reveals itself not with violence, but with subtlety. In the small moments, the reaction that feels stronger than the situation, the irritation we cannot explain, the envy that surprises us, the sadness that arrives without reason. The shadow speaks in the language of emotion, and when we refuse to listen, it grows louder. Examples: anger is unspoken pain. Imagine someone who seems endlessly calm, endlessly patient, someone who smiles through everything, someone who never raises their voice, until one day they do. Suddenly, sharply, painfully, people call it overreacting. But Jung would say, this was not anger. This was pain finally allowed to surface. Anger often is not an attack. It is a cry that says, I was hurt, and I did not know how to say so. When we do not let ourselves feel pain, it finds another doorway. Pride is fear of inadequacy. Or think of pride, the need to be right, the fear of making mistakes, the pressure to appear confident. Pride is rarely arrogance. It is often the quiet terror of being seen as not enough. Somewhere inside, a voice says, if I am not perfect, I will not be loved. And so a person becomes grand, impressive, confident, not to dominate, but to protect a wound too tender to touch. The shadow is always trying to protect us, even when the protection hurts. The danger of denial. When we deny the shadow, it does not disappear. It acts without our awareness. We project it. We accuse others of the flaws we fear in ourselves. We distrust others for feelings we cannot face in our own hearts. What we do not accept, we blame. What we do not understand, we fear. What we do not face controls us. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Meeting the shadow gently. The work, Jung believed, is not to conquer the shadow, but to turn toward it with patience, with curiosity, with softness. To ask, what are you trying to tell me? And then to listen. Not to justify, not to explain, not to judge, just to listen. The moment we acknowledge the shadow, it no longer has to shout. The pain that was once overwhelming becomes understandable. The jealousy becomes longing. The anger becomes grief. The pride becomes fear. The numbness becomes exhaustion. And exhaustion can finally rest. To meet the shadow is to meet the forgotten parts of yourself. The parts that wanted to be loved. The parts that wanted to be seen. The parts that were told they were too much or not enough. When we welcome them, we do not become darker. We become whole. Integration is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. It is about saying, yes, I feel anger. Yes, I feel fear. Yes, I feel sadness. Yes, I feel desire. And none of this makes me unworthy. None of this makes me broken. None of this makes me less human. It makes me alive. A soft closing. The shadow is not what we must defeat. It is what we must embrace. Not to excuse harmfulness, but to understand its roots. Because everything we hide is only asking for one thing: to be seen and to be held without shame. If we can offer that to ourselves, even just a little, we step into a quiet, courageous truth. We are deeper than we knew. We are softer than we show. We are more whole than we realize. The masks we wear. Before we learn to speak, we learn to perform. We watch the faces around us. What earns a smile? What draws disappointment? What brings warmth? What invites silence? Slowly, we begin to edit ourselves. And from these edits, we shape what Carl Jung called the persona, the mask we present to the world. Not a lie, but not the whole truth. Introduction to the persona. The persona is the polished version of us, the part that knows what to say, how to behave, how to fit. It is the voice we use at work, the calm we show in public, the competence we display even when we feel lost. The persona is how we become acceptable, how we become safe. It protects us, but every protection has a cost. We all wear masks, not because we are dishonest, but because the world rarely knows what to do with our depths. So we simplify ourselves. We become the reliable one, or the quiet one, or the funny one, or the strong one. Roles. Performances. Well practiced. Automatic. And over time, we forget that these were things we chose, not things we are. How the persona forms. Many of us learned very young that certain emotions made others uncomfortable. A child cries and is told to be strong. A child shows curiosity and is told to be realistic. A child becomes excited and is told to calm down. So the child learns. Excitement is too much. Sadness is unwelcome. Joy must be quiet. Fear must be hidden. The child begins to trim pieces of themselves until they fit the shape of the world around them. The persona is born out of survival, out of wanting to belong. This is not failure. This is adaptation. But every adaptation has a shadow. The persona protects. The persona helps us move through life. It allows us to function, to work, to socialize, to find our place in the vastness of the world. It shields us from judgment. It shields us from exposure. It shields us from the fear of being seen too clearly. For many of us, the persona is a blessing. It is how we get through the day. But sometimes we forget to take it off. The persona becomes a prison. When we wear the mask too long, we start to believe it is us. The reliable one becomes exhausted but doesn't know how to ask for help. The strong one cries quietly at night because they don't know where to put their sadness. The agreeable one forgets how to say no. The cheerful one forgets how to rest. When we live only in the persona, we trade authenticity for acceptance. And the cost is our inner world. The persona protects us, but it also imprisons us. To be seen only for the role we play is to remain unseen entirely. We smile while aching. We nod while doubting. We stay polite while longing to be understood. Behind the mask, the true self waits like a quiet voice in another room. Soft, patient, persistent, waiting to be heard. Signs we are living too fully in the persona. Jung believed that the persona becomes unhealthy when it replaces rather than represents us. We may feel a constant need to prove ourselves, a sudden fatigue around others, a sense that no one truly knows us, or emotional numbness or quiet sadness. The question, if I stopped trying, would anything remain? These feelings are not failures. They are signals. Signals that the mask has become too tight, that the self beneath is struggling to breathe. The pain of authenticity. Taking off the persona is not easy. To show our truest self means risking misunderstanding, disappointment, rejection. It is easier to appear strong than to say, I am hurting. Easier to appear independent than to say, I need closeness. Easier to smile than to say, I am afraid. Authenticity is frightening because it requires tenderness, and tenderness is vulnerable. But to be known, truly known, is impossible without vulnerability. To be loved, not for how we perform, but for who we are, requires being seen. And being seen requires removing the mask. Not all at once, not dramatically, not for everyone. Just slowly, gently, with care. A small exercise spoken slowly. Ask yourself, when I say, who am I referring to? The one others expect me to be, or the one who watches from within? If the answer is unclear, that is not a failure. It is the beginning of awareness. The persona is not the enemy. It simply does not need to be the whole story. There is a self beneath the mask, a self that has always been there, a self that is not trying to impress or perform or adapt, a self that wants only one thing, to be allowed to breathe, allowed to feel, allowed to rest. And when we learn to gently lift the persona, to let our true self step forward, even just a little, we begin to live not from fear, but from truth. Soft pause, as if someone is exhaling for the first time. To remove the mask is not to lose yourself. It is to come home to yourself. The journey toward wholeness. To Carl Jung, the goal of life was not perfection, not success, not mastery. The goal was wholeness. Wholeness is not the polished self we show the world. It is not the persona we carefully maintain. It is not the shadow we hide from others and from ourselves. Wholeness is what happens when all the parts of us finally sit at the same table and are allowed to speak. Jung called this process individuation. Not becoming someone new, but remembering who you have always been. Individuation, not becoming better, but becoming real. In most of life, we are taught to improve ourselves, work harder, be stronger, be kinder, be wiser, be more confident, be less afraid, always becoming, always reaching, always striving. But Jung offers a different path. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is self-return. It is the moment you stop trying to become the person others expect and begin listening to the quiet voice that has always lived in your chest. The one that speaks only in whispers. The one that says, "This is who I am. This is what I need. This is what hurts. This is what I love." Individuation begins when we honor the voice we have ignored, reuniting the conscious and the unconscious. Most of us live only in our conscious mind, the mind that solves problems, makes plans, speaks, chooses. But beneath that mind lies something deeper, the unconscious. A vast ocean of memory, emotion, instinct, story, symbol. The unconscious is not the unknown. It is the unspoken. It holds the grief we never admitted, the dreams we abandoned, the fears we learned to hide, the joy we forgot how to feel, the versions of ourselves left behind along the way. To individuate is to turn toward that ocean, to listen, not to drown in it, but to let its tide shape us gently. We do not become whole by ignoring the unconscious. We become whole by welcoming it home. Your shadow sits across the table. When we stop running from the shadow, something remarkable happens. It stops chasing us. The anger we feared becomes honesty. The envy we hated becomes longing. The fear we buried becomes tenderness. The vulnerability we hid becomes connection. The shadow, once embraced, becomes a teacher. It no longer says, "You are broken." It says, "You are human." And the self that once felt scattered begins to gather, piece by piece, softly, patiently. Individuation is not dramatic. There are no fireworks, no great declarations, no sudden transformation. It is quiet. It looks like a saying no when you are tired, admitting when you are hurt, a letting yourself cry without apology, allowing joy without guilt, a speaking the truth gently but firmly, a choosing relationships where you can be seen. Individuation is not a journey of achievement. It is a journey of allowing the self to be complete rather than correct. We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to be whole. Wholeness has sadness in it. Wholeness has anger in it. Wholeness has fear in it. Wholeness has longing in it. Wholeness is every part of us, moving in the same direction. It is walking forward with everything we have been, not leaving pieces of ourselves in the past. It is saying, "I'm many things, and all of them are allowed." Returning to authenticity. Authenticity is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not a performance of honesty. Authenticity is the quiet relief of finally being able to exhale. It is the gentle release of tension when we stop trying to hold our lives together with force. It is the soft truth of being exactly who we are without fear. Authenticity is not about being seen by everyone. It is about being known by yourself. Wholeness is self-compassion. To individuate is to treat yourself like someone who deserves care. To say, "I am trying. I have learned. I am allowed mistakes. I forgive what I did to survive. I am still growing." Self-compassion is the softest revolution. It is the turning point. The moment the war inside you begins to end. Individuation is not a destination. It is a lifelong unfolding, a gentle unraveling of old defenses, a return to the center of your being. Quiet homecoming. We become whole not when we eliminate the dark, but when we learn to move with it. Not when we silence the shadow, but when we listen to it with kindness. Not when we perfect the persona, but when we loosen it and allow our true self to breathe. Wholeness is not something we earn. It is something we remember. Long soft pause, almost silence. You are not trying to become yourself. You are already yourself, learning to believe it. Love, myth, and meaning. Carl Jung did not see the mind as a machine of logic or a structure of chemicals or a cold collection of impulses. To him, the soul was a storyteller. And every dream, every artwork, every ancient myth was a whisper from the deepest chamber of ourselves. Not the part that talks, the part that knows. The language beneath language. Jung believed that the human soul speaks a language older than words, a language of images, visions, symbols, a vast landscape inside us where meaning grows like wild forests. This is why a dream can feel more real than waking life. Why music can make us cry without a single lyric. Why a story from thousands of years ago can feel like it is speaking directly to us. The soul does not speak in sentences. It speaks in symbols. An open door, a wolf watching from the tree line, a child wandering through a long corridor, a house with rooms you have never seen. Jung teaches us. Dreams are messages from the part of your life you have not yet lived. Myth as a mirror. Myths are not old stories. They are maps of the human heart. When ancient people spoke of Hercules battling monsters, they were telling the story of courage against fear. When they told of Persephone descending into the underworld, they were telling the story of grief and returning to life again. When they spoke of lovers who could not touch, they were telling the story of longing and the ache of being seen. Jung believed that we tell the same stories again and again because we are still learning how to be human. The world changes. History moves. Empires rise and fall. But the heart remains the same. We still fear being alone. We still crave love. We still long to be seen, understood, held. We still break. We still rise. The myths of the past are simply our own reflection seen across time. The collective unconscious, a shared dream. In the deepest layer of the psyche, Jung saw something extraordinary. A shared memory. A shared story. A shared emotional inheritance carried by every human being. He called it the collective unconscious. Meaning, we are not isolated souls drifting through life. We share the same psychological landscape. We all know the hero. We all know the mother. We all know the lover. We all know the wanderer. We all know the shadow. Even if we are born in different countries, speak different languages, live in different eras, these archetypes live inside us. They are not taught. They are remembered. And so when a story touches us, it is not because it is new. It is because it is ancient. It is us. Love is a bridge between inner worlds. Jung did not speak of love as romance alone. He spoke of love as recognition. Love begins when your inner world meets another inner world and does not run. When two psyches look at each other and say, I know this landscape. I have walked this forest. I have felt this hunger. I have carried this wound. Love is not about two perfect people. It is about two people willing to see each other fully and stay. To Jung, love was a path of individuation too. For in love, we meet our shadow, our fears, our hopes, our unmet needs, our quiet longing. To love is to be revealed. And to be revealed is to be vulnerable. Love is not comfortable. It is transformative. Art as a door to the unconscious. Jung found that art was not decoration. Art was not entertainment. Art was the soul trying to speak. When someone paints a landscape that never existed, the landscape exists inside them. When someone writes a poem of grief, they are shaping their sorrow into something they can hold without being broken by it. Art is how the mind heals itself when words are not enough. This is why music can feel like prayer. Why poetry feels like confession. Why dance feels like remembering something you cannot explain. Art is how the soul returns to itself. Religion, spirit, and the inner temple. Jung did not ask whether God was real in the way others argued. He asked whether we could live without the idea of something greater. Not necessarily a deity, but meaning, direction, a guiding light in the dark corridor of existence. He believed that every spiritual tradition is a mirror of the psyche. When we pray, we are speaking to the part of us that hopes. When we meditate, we are listening to the part of us that knows. When we bow, we are honoring the part of us that loves. Religion, myth, dream, all are doors leading inward. If the soul speaks in symbols, then meaning is never lost. Even when we feel alone, Even when life feels directionless, even when the world seems cold, somewhere inside us, the old stories continue to burn. We carry them like embers under the ash. We are never truly separate, never truly isolated, never truly without guidance. Because the stories we tell are the stories the world has always told. And the feelings we carry are the feelings countless hearts have carried before us. We are not alone. We have never been alone. We walk through life carrying the echoes of every soul who has ever struggled to understand themselves. This is the quiet gift Jung left us. Your story is part of a story much larger than you. Long, gentle silence. A candle flickers. A page turns. Breath slow and deep. We return to stillness. The legacy of seeing deeply. Carl Jung did not leave behind a rigid system. No commandments. No strict doctrines to memorize. No blueprint for how every life should be lived. Instead, he left us something gentler. Something alive. Something that grows only when we are ready. He left us a path. A way of walking toward ourselves. Not with force, not with shame, but with patience, with curiosity, with tenderness. Because Jung believed the greatest act of courage is not conquering the world outside, but turning toward the world within. To face ourselves gently. We are often taught to approach the self as a problem to solve. Fix yourself, improve yourself, eliminate your flaws, defeat your weaknesses. But Jung whispers something different. Do not fight the self. Sit with it. To face yourself gently is to say, I will not run from what I feel. I will not shame the parts of me that hurt. I will sit with my fear. I will learn from my sadness. I will listen to my longing. We are not here to purge our emotions. We are here to understand them. This is how the war inside begins to soften. To hold our darkness with warmth. The shadow does not go away when we suppress it. It quiets, then waits. It waits in the voice we almost speak, in the tears we almost cry, in the anger we almost express, in the love we almost allow. When we push our shadow away, we push away a part of ourselves. Jung teaches us the shadow is not the enemy. The shadow is a wound. It does not need punishment. It needs listening. It needs a warm hand, slow breath, a moment of presence. When we hold our darkness with warmth, something astonishing happens. The darkness speaks, and what it says is not frightening. It says, please see me. Please understand why I learned to be this way. I'm only trying to keep you safe. The shadow is not here to destroy us. It is here to protect the parts of us that once felt alone. And when we hold it gently, it softens. To integrate, not to conquer. Wholeness is not about victory. It is about inclusion. It is understanding that every emotion, every memory, every fracture, every unfinished feeling has a place within us. A place at the table. Integration is the moment the self stops fighting itself. When the mind says, yes, this is part of me. This has always been part of me. And I no longer need to hide from it. Integration is quiet. It feels like a breath releasing slowly, a truth spoken softly, a weight set down, a door opening inward. It is not triumph. It is relief. We become human again. So many of us are tired without knowing why. We are tired from pretending to be stronger than we are, from smiling when we are grieving, from holding back words we needed to say, from carrying stories alone. Jung's path is the permission to stop, to rest in our own truth, to be the person we are instead of the person we learn to appear to be. Wholeness is not a destination we reach. It is a way of being in this moment, right now, as we are. No more, no less. Wholeness is not perfection. Wholeness is honesty. Perfection isolates. Perfection demands masks. Perfection tightens the chest and silences the heart. But honesty lets the soul return home. Honesty says, I am complex. I am changing. I am learning. I am allowed to be unfinished. The self is not a sculpture. It is a garden. It grows. It withers. It blooms again. And all of it is sacred. the legacy we inherit. Jung did not ask us to be heroes. He asked us to be present, to notice the quiet tremor in our chest when something matters, to listen to the dream that returns night after night, to pay attention to the ache behind the anger, to follow the longing that never truly went away. Jung's legacy is not in textbooks. It is in every quiet person who turns inward and asks, "What is this feeling trying to tell me? What part of me is asking to be seen? What truth have I been afraid to speak?" The legacy of Jung is the permission to be whole. We walk through life carrying pieces of ourselves we have not yet learned to love. But there is time. There is always time. Time to return. Time to soften. Time to see. Time to understand. Understanding begins when judgment ends. So tonight, if there is a part of you that aches, a part of you avoid, a part of you that feels forgotten, do not turn away. Sit beside it. Place a hand upon it. Listen, not to control, not to fix, just to know, because every part of you belongs, and the journey home has already begun. A quiet return to yourself. And now, as the light fades and the last words settle into the quiet of your room, let us return, not to the world outside, but to the one within. You do not need to solve yourself tonight. You do not need to overcome, to conquer, to correct. Simply sit, just as you are, with whatever you are carrying. There is no thought too heavy, no feeling too strange, no memory too deep. All of it belongs. All of it has something to say. So tonight, let the mind wander gently. Let the heart speak without interruption. Let your inner world unfold softly, like a page turning in a book that has waited years to be read. Do not fear what rises. Do not turn away from what stirs. Just listen, because the shadow is not here to haunt you. It is here to guide you back to the parts of yourself that have waited in silence for far too long. You are not broken. You are unfolding. You are returning.